all this talk of the playoff format, right? We are back to the drawing board. So much discussion on both sides, fighting back and forth, fighting behind the scenes between the Big Ten and the SEC, which the Big 12 kind of threw a Molotov cocktail in the middle of and ran away, waiting for the chaos to engulf both of those conferences. Now it's back to square one. So what does it mean? Is this good news for the Big 12? Is it bad news for the Big 12? I think it's high risk, high reward. I think there is huge risk associated with this, but I also think that there could be a really nice reward depending on what happens here. So here's the latest from Brett McMurphy, one of the best college sports reporters out there, one of the most well-connected college sports reporters out there. Brett McMurphy says conference commissioners have decided to, quote, start over, end quote, on determining the 2026 college football playoff format. Big Ten and SEC initially wanted 4 automatic qualifiers with 2 each to the ACC and Big 12. However, the ACC and Big 12 pushed back. SEC coaches later publicly did not support the 4 automatic qualifier model, instead preferring the 5+11 at-large format. The SEC wants more value given to strength of schedule metrics, something playoff executives discussed. However, a source cautioned even if strength of schedule is supposed to carry more weight with the committee, it still boils down to their opinions on who they think are the best teams. The deadline for finalizing the format is December 1st. So there is some time. There is some time here to actually determine the format, but it does not appear to be moving very quickly, and we don't have a ton of time before the season actually starts. And once the season actually starts, at that point, I imagine it gets much more difficult to get everybody into a room and to talk about this in earnest. So we shall see. The possibility is becoming increasingly more likely that this turns into 2026 is the same thing. They just start the next contract of the playoff under the same format and rules that we have right now, which would be a 12-team playoff. 5 highest-ranked conference champions go in now, thanks to this vote. That is one thing I will say. The Big 12 and ACC caving on changing it to the top 4 teams getting the buys this year could burn them now, because that could sting them 2 years in a row. And then I imagine they would not be getting paid for it either in 2026. Either way, we could just carry over that same format into 2026. That's what happens if they don't hit that December 1st deadline, right? You're just barreling toward this deadline. That's the consequence if you don't do anything there. So Brett McMurphy did a pretty good job outlining this, right? I mean, it was assumed for a long time that the 4-4-2-2 model would just be adopted. And whether it was 1 at-large or 3 at-larges beyond that with a 14 or 16-team playoff, that the bulk of it would be 4 each for the Big Ten and SEC, 2 each for the Big 12 and the ACC. But now, nobody will give in to that. The SEC seemed to, I guess, the thought was be on board with that until Brett Yormark, remember it was reported, Yormark is the one who came to the table with, hey, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to sign up for that. How about a 5+11 model where your 5 highest ranked conference champs go and then everybody else is just at large? Like, you got to earn it every single year. We're not going to guarantee anything to any conferences. Go get it every single year. And once that was floated out there, well, SEC coaches were like, hey, I like that idea. For one, because generally, and they're not saying this because they're fighting so hard against strength of schedule, but generally, we're going to get the benefit of the doubt in any kind of at-large situation. They know that. I mean, despite what they're saying, they know that. That's why it's so ridiculous how hard they're pushing on the strength of schedule thing. They know they already get the edge anyway. But there's also the fact that the coaches didn't want these play-in games that would have come for sure attached to the 4-4-2-2 format, where it means conference championship weekend, 3 versus 6 plays for a spot in the playoff and 4 versus 5 plays for a spot in the playoff. They didn't want to deal with that. Another game, and then you're going into an extended playoff, and what? We're going to end up playing like 16, 17, like 17, 18 games here, potentially. Nobody wanted that. Coaches didn't like that. So it was pretty easy to rally the SEC all of a sudden behind this cause from the Big 12, ACC, Notre Dame, and Group of 6, just for different reasons that everybody is actually there. Where we're at a stalemate is the Big Ten's not going to give in on 5+11 unless the SEC goes to a 9-game conference schedule at the very least. That's kind of table stakes for the Big Ten coming to the negotiating table on that. And the SEC is like, well, we don't want to do that unless we know that we're going to get whatever assurances we possibly can on strength of schedule. So that's basically what's been happening the last few weeks, and it's gotten us to the point where nothing is apparently going to happen. And I guess I'm glad to read what Brett McMurphy said there about the strength of schedule discussion. He said, even if the strength of schedule is supposed to carry more weight with the committee, it still boils down to their opinions on who they think are the best teams. I mean, I like hearing that because it is, this discussion about strength of schedule is so ridiculous for the SEC. I mean, they already get very much so preferential treatment because of exactly that, their strength of schedule. That's why Bama and Ole Miss were legit possibilities for the playoff last year in that final at-large spot. Nobody else, no other 9-3 team from any other conference was going to be considered, but the SEC teams were because of their strength of schedule. So I don't know what it is that they want. Like if they want guarantees that like an 8-4 SEC team is going to get in over an 11-1 Big 12 or ACC team or something. I mean, or even Big 10 team if it's Indiana. I mean, it really seems like that's like what the SEC is pushing for here. Ridiculous. It doesn't override to that extent. And that's basically what you would be asking for. It's crazy, man. It's crazy how gluttonous the SEC has become with the strength of schedule thing. I will grant them that, yes, they generally are going to have the toughest schedules in the country. They're already getting an advantage for that. They've been rewarded handsomely for it. Ask Florida State about a couple of years ago how that went. And now they want to sit and cry and whine and moan about it. But that's the big tension right now between the Big Ten and the SEC. Big Ten's like, well, we're not doing this. If we play non-conference games, you only play 8, and then it's all going to be at-large stuff, and we have no guarantees. Why would we do that? And I understand why the Big Ten would say that. So we're in a bit of a mess, and now you have to wonder what's going to rise from the ashes, right? There's been all this fighting. Everything has sort of crumbled. What's going to rise from the ashes? Will it still be a 4-4-2-2 model versus a 5-11 model? Will it be some variation? Will it be something totally different? Who's got ideas that they can pitch here? What will make everybody? Remember on the last show, I played you that audio cut from Brett Yormark where he was like, we'll find something I think that's good for everybody. Maybe not great for everybody, but good for everybody. What could be a new format here that rises from the ashes that would be considered good for everybody? That, I think, is one of the questions. Can somebody cook something up? Will it be some other variation of what is already here? You know, I mean, some people have discussed, what if it's a 4-4-2.5 sort of thing for the ACC and Big 12, which I know goes against the whole idea that Big 12 and ACC are standing their ground because they won't sign on the dotted line that they are lesser than the SEC or the Big 10. But if they sweeten the pot enough, does that get them on board for that? I doubt it, but who knows? We'll see with time and perspective. And I don't know. Maybe Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips listened to too much of Joel Klatt. We'll see. Or is there something potentially more sinister here? That is one of the things you have to consider. This is the high risk part of this whole equation is, could Greg Sankey find some way? I mean, the man is always plotting and scheming for some way to just tilt and leverage everything that much more in favor of the SEC and typically by proxy, the Big Ten as well. Will they find something even worse to throw out here? Will they succeed in getting some extra like strength of schedule benchmark? I don't know what that would be, or if it's going to be FPI, or if it's going to be TV ratings like was once floated out there to play some role in this. Could something worse come out of this? I think you always have to acknowledge that is a non-zero chance. Especially, I mean, the SEC and Big Ten have been meeting together about things often enough. You just never know what they could come up with here. So I do think you need to worry about that. But, first of all, you are, no matter what, forced into this position if you're the Big 12 and ACC by simply just defending your honor. If your position, which I understand this position, I think it's probably the right one, even if it's hard. If your position is, we will just not sign away that we're half these other conferences for a myriad of business reasons and not going to put a ceiling on ourselves right now. If you do that, you have no choice but to accept this risk that there could be a temporary format here that comes out that's actually worse for you. That is always out there. Unfortunately, it is. But I will say this. If you have now gummed up the works enough, slowed down the debate enough that we just get another year of a 12-team playoff and the status quo basically in 2026, That is a bit of a win for the Big 12. That is, because, I mean, it's not guaranteeing you 2 teams in the playoff. You may well still just have one, but it limits the amount of at-large spots that are there for Big Ten and SEC schools. So it limits the amount of teams they could cram in there to make it look even worse, dominate you numbers-wise in terms of who's in the playoff. Status quo is okay. That's okay. Not only because of the effect it has on next year, but then that's one less year that you have to swallow whatever awful playoff format they're going to shove down your throat at some point. Because it's coming. I mean, the Big 12 knows they're going to have to take their medicine at some point, right? You know, mom's got the spoonful of Sudafed or whatever it is. The airplane's coming. You can't run and hide and keep your mouth away forever. You're going to have to swallow the medicine at some point. But if you can run around long enough that you avoid an entire year on this next playoff contract, well, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. So there are potential advantages here. There are potential advantages here if this just stalls out for now. But keep your eye on it. Keep your eye on it. I mean, the point here, it's kind of like, you know, the old Tupac quote. You see it on T-shirts or whatever, bumper stickers. Trust no one. Trust no one. Especially not Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, the SEC, or the Big Ten. Those are not people that you can trust on a regular basis throughout all of this. Okay, let's say hello to Kim. What's up, Kim? Kim says, has to be Kansas State, which is fair, and Iowa State losing that QB has no impact on those with dollars. Okay, back to driving, and I didn't even yell at you. Hey, Kim, I appreciate you. It is all good. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here tonight. And yes, you are correct. K-State's getting a lot of love from these rankings that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, which, you know, has me a little bit conflicted. I'm kind of like, I was kind of looking forward to maybe a bit more of an underdog role this year for the old Cats. And yes, Iowa State lost its quarterback to Alabama, a quarterback commit for 2026. We're going to talk about that. Probably doesn't affect a Texas Tech as much. Iowa State is certainly not one of the schools near the top of NIL money in the Big 12. But if you listen at least to the kid, the quarterback himself, it was about NFL and, you know, I mean, the typical things that you would think would be there when you go to Alabama instead of Iowa State. But I do think there are some reverberations across the Big 12. So I will talk about that. But Kim, appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your question and comment. I guess comment, not so much a question, your comment. Our web, what's up, our web? Our web says, John, I have thought that Yormark throwing out 5+11 was a poison pill to split the SEC and Big Ten. You know what? And I saw your next comment here too, our web, which I totally agree with you on. Status quo doesn't hurt the Big 12, especially from a money perspective relative to the Big Ten and the SEC. You are absolutely correct. That's another point. I made the point of just like how bad it would look if it's a, 5-11 and it's like 7 SEC teams and 1 Big 12 team. Like, that's really tough to swallow just from a perception standpoint, but you're also right just from a financial standpoint. That would help you as well. Status quo is not bad. This is a really interesting theory. People are, why would Brett Yormark ever do this? How could he possibly? I really do think a large part of it is, what he talked about on that Fox Sports Triple Option podcast that I played on Sunday. But I really do think a lot of it is just a simple idea of you don't codify that you are half of these other two conferences for a bunch of reasons. You have to kind of go with the long play here and hope that something works out eventually that will get you a little more even than just being half of those conferences in perpetuity, for the rest of time. But there may be something to this element of it as well. Like, hey, if I can just throw a wrench into all of this, it leaves everybody scrambling and get them fighting with each other because they kind of are now. They really are, man. If you watch like Big Ten and SEC fans going back and forth on social media, there's a lot of that now. See, our web says the SEC and Big Ten look like clowns in this. There's something to that, man. There's something to that. I think the thought for so long was, well, they'll just ram the 4 auto bid thing through, no problem. And here they are. They're having a lot of problems. And I've seen this all over the place. Like, shout out to my guy, Greg Flugar, who does a great job with the Peek Around the Corner college football YouTube channel. You should absolutely go check out, go subscribe to his channel. But I've seen him, he's a Big Ten guy. And I've seen a lot of him really going after the SEC over and over again on Twitter. I understand it. If I were the Big Ten, I would probably be frustrated as well. But it's not just that. Then Diego Pavia pops off on a podcast this week, Vanderbilt's quarterback, about how much tougher the SEC is because you don't get to play. Now, this was very funny. Who was it that he dropped? It was somebody in Nebraska, Purdue and Nebraska. I think he threw under the bus. SEC schedules, you don't get the breaks like Purdue and Nebraska, which really, really funny. Really funny. Vandy is now taking shots at Nebraska and how easy of a week it is when you get to go play Nebraska. Chef's kiss. Thank you, Diego Pavia. I'm not sure if I were Diego Pavia, I would have gone and trashed on a bunch of opponents on my schedule like Tennessee on a podcast. But hey, for a content perspective and my entertainment, it's been great. So I love that. But yeah, and anyway, I saw that quote gets put out there on Twitter, and it's just like the replies are just, you've got like Ohio State fan accounts getting out there and getting after it. Like, you kind of have set this trap up where the SEC and the Big Ten are really, really at each other's throat right now, fighting about this. And a lot of it surrounds like, hey, SEC's not going to go to a 9-game schedule. Big Ten's really top heavy. They've got some great teams at the top. They've won back-to-back national titles, but there is no doubt you have more off weeks in the Big Ten than the SEC, 100% for sure. So it's a very interesting debate. It doesn't seem like one that has an easy solution. And now we're getting closer and closer to the season. So like I said, if you get to the season, nothing's been solved yet, man. I mean, who the hell knows where this actually goes from here? So if that were the strategy, I mean, mission accomplished for Brett Yormark. It has, at least to this point, been a mission accomplished thing. So I think you're really, really spot on here, R-Web. We're on a pretty similar wavelength about all of this.